Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Supernatural Substation, your last stop before the unknown. I'm your host, Alyne Pustanio, and with me is my co-host, Bernadine Richardson. Hi, Bernadine.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Is everybody doing good in this Mercury retrograde?
You spoiled it for me. I didn't even know one existed. Now it's going to go wrong.
Since March 14th.
Yeah, since March 14th. And see,
yes,
there you go. You get a little...
6th.
April what?
6th.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Mercury. Yeah, I hate these Mercury retrogrades. That makes a lot of sense.
But I know my dog is cutting up. It's like everything is going crazy.
Well, as long as, it mostly affects things like communications, primarily, machinery, appliances, problems with that, traffic, snarls, all of that. So don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Be careful with machinery. Look out with your phones, texting, sending things to the wrong people. Don't sign anything in business, the whole 9 yards. Anything to do with the communications, because that's what Mercury is. And the planet it deals with communications and interactions between people and peoples, multiple, including countries. Look, I was looking at the news, and Aaron Goodwin of Ghost Adventures, the story came up, and I have to admit, I don't follow Aaron Goodwin. I don't even follow Zach Bagans or any of that, so I don't really know what's going on with them. But apparently he got married a few years ago, and it was supposed to be the love of his life, and her name's Victoria, and it was wonderful. And they got married at the haunted mansion and all kind of stuff. Well, she just got arrested for soliciting to have someone murder Aaron Goodwin, her husband. So she was looking for somebody to knock him off. And I have no doubt that he has a good insurance policy and money in the bank. So whoever Victoria was, I think I sent you the YouTube link, and I saw that there's something in the background. It must be the Mercury retrograde. But
yes.
It's just feedback, probably. Sorry, y'all. Sorry, everyone. But apparently this woman was in touch with an inmate in jail in Florida, I think Miami. But this guy, I don't remember his name, but he had killed like his brother and sister and a bunch of stuff. So it's a big case in Florida. And he's in prison for life. Don't know how, but for some reason she started corresponding with him first. Then she got him a cell phone. There's ways to get them cell phones if you know the right people and you have the money. Got the guy a cell phone and was talking to him about how to set it up to get Aaron Goodwin killed. And it was going to be soon, because it was going to be when they were filming something in Florida. They were going to do something. Yeah, it was going to be soon. In other words, when she was talking soon. And she was, the guy said it was a weirdly specific amount of like $11,515. Whoever the guy was going to be must have wanted to pay something specific off with a $2,500 down payment. And it ended up that whoever they were interacting with was obviously police, and they got her. And she said in her defense that she was just pretending. She was just talking about it and pretending, like, what if this happened? Oh, how would it? No, she gave specific information and days when Aaron Goodwin would be filming something in Florida, somewhere in Florida. So that would mean Zach would be with them and they'd all be there. And then so nobody deserves to be killed, but Aaron Goodwin does not deserve to be killed. Okay. I mean, he just doesn't deserve it. He seems like he's gone along with the Ghost Adventures thing all these years because, hey, it's money in the bank. But he does not deserve to be killed. So he had no idea about it. He was devastated when they told him. So I don't know.
Well,
she wanted to make him a ghost. Shouldn't have made him a ghost. She could have been created and said, well, I wanted to see if I could communicate with him. If we could talk together, from the other side. But I mean, that's as good an excuse as saying, well, I was just playing and making it up. Right. Okay. You're LARPing as a murderer. Okay. That's bad. So, and anyway, and then I saw this other thing, which had escaped us. It's been a few years ago now, but this apparent 911 call from a ghost from a funeral home. I sent you that too to look at, and that was creepy as hell. If you look it up, it's Imperial Gardens Funeral Home in Arizona, and you just have to Google Imperial Gardens Funeral Home ghost or whatever. There was a 911 call placed from the Imperial Gardens Funeral Home, except that it was like at 3:15 in the morning when nobody is there except the dead. Nobody is there. And apparently the call, it appeared that the call disconnected, but that the line was still open. If I read the article correctly. And so the 911 dispatcher, the operator, could still hear somebody on the line. You can't really tell that it kind of disconnected unless you listen back to it. But you can clearly, well, not, pristine clearly, but you can clearly hear somebody in it. There's a man, and he appears to be saying, "Come get me," from the, I guess, ... from this funeral home. And he says it a couple of times before they start getting like background noise from the dispatch center and all that. And it's only like 45 seconds, but it's the creepiest 45 seconds I've ever heard. I mean, that was creepy. So I went online and I was like, and not surprisingly, Imperial Gardens comes up, boom, funeral homes in Arizona, there it is. And I was looking around, they have pictures of their facility. And I was looking around, which is creepy too, because they set up for like memorials, big celebrations of life where you can get food and all this kind of stuff. And it's creepy because in order for a call to be made, it'd have to be from a phone, obviously. So where's the phone? I mean, the phone in the embalming room, the phone in the refrigerator with him. I have no idea. So you all should look that up. I'm going to try in a future episode to try and get that sound clip so we can go over it again and listen to it. But in the meantime, y'all Google this and go listen to this guy's voice. This guy wanted to be picked up. He didn't know where he was. And as a matter of fact, it segues. Look, proud of me, Dean. We're going to segue into our topic for tonight. Our topic for tonight. Yay. Well, now we've started this little series from kind of like using my book as a guide, Supernatural Dangers of Paranormal Exploration. And so we're just taking it like a couple of chapters at a time to help paranormal investigators, people interested in the paranormal, people interested in the occult, to understand kind of what we think about it, how we approach it. Dean from the investigative side of it, and me from and you have to say occult or supernatural side. And I only say occult not because I practice it, but because I reference the traditions that deal with the different things that we're talking about, like, death and the death state and ghosts and the other realities. So last week we talked about the realities of the world, and of the worlds rather. in the different planes of existence, from physical, low vibration physical, to etheric reality, to astral, to mental, and then to supernal at the very top, which, is unreachable except through death. So we talked about that, and we talked about how spirits can linger in these different realities, and primarily in the etheric reality, which is close to the physical reality that we share. So the lower etheric region is where you go into, boom, when you die. So you have to understand death, I think, to basically understand how these spirits end up in these different realities. Because in the etheric, a lot of spirits get trapped there for a lot of different reasons. And these are the spirits that we're interacting with. Primarily the human dead, but not the recently dead all the time. Not somebody who just died necessarily. Because as we talked about, there are millions of spirits moving through the etheric region, and they are seeking contact. A lot of them are seeking contact with us, and they have their variety and a myriad numbers of reasons for staying attached to the physical world. So to understand how the dead get caught in these, basically negative conditions, unable to move on. And, this is a condition that forces them basically into interactions with the living because they're attached to our reality. The paranormal researcher would do good to benefit from understanding what the death process is according to tradition. And this is not science, okay? I'm not saying science, according to occult and paranormal tradition. So, death happens. So death is a natural progression. It is the movement of the spirit body from the physical form and into the journey that begins in the next adventure when they become self-aware in the unseen world. We talked about our flesh bodies being transitory, decomposing, low vibration, matter, and the soul leaving our body goes back to the creator, the vital essence, the supernal, whatever you want to say. But the spirit personality that is left is you. That's you, the personality. That's what makes you you. And it contains everything about your personality, all the little nuances that people know that are part of you. Like little things that you do, ways that you talk. A lot of people experience shortly after death, things moving in the kitchen, like if their dead loved one put their coffee cup out at night with a spoon, stuff like that. Not necessarily maybe the coffee cup, but the spoon might be there. So everything that kind of made you that other people would recognize is still intact in your spirit form. So then it's more easily recognized. And well, we all know that these separations can be slow. Naturally, someone dies of natural causes or the progression of an illness, and then they finally succumb. Old age, there are good deaths, basically, which is peaceful. And I guess most people say, I want to die in my sleep. That's probably the number one. They don't, they don't want to be aware of it. No pain. And you can say too, Dean. I've known several people in my family and other people who they went to sleep and that's it. They just died. And there was it was natural causes, no trauma. Of course, that's ideal,
I call it waking up dead.
Yeah, you wake up dead. When you become self-aware in the unseen reality, and that is a very smooth passage. And so there's a good chance that people that have good deaths, will pass on quickly and, not linger around their dead relatives, the Earth's magnetic sphere, not stay close to physical reality. And billions upon billions just go on. But there are some that experience a tragic death, or a swift, something suddenly happens, or, basically unexpected death, tragedy, or unexpected and very quick. Well, especially in tragic deaths like car crashes, other kind of accidents, other kind of trauma to the body, the physical body, and suddenly you're dead. Well, when this happens, your soul and your spirit are forced out of your body so quickly that there's really no time. There's really, you're boom, you're alive, boom. Now you're dead. That's it. And like in auto accidents, there's a picture. I've seen it in a couple of, there are these YouTube channels that do these compilations of things, like camping. The big ones now are, creepy camping experiences. And 90% of this stuff, 99, I don't even know, 95, let's say, percent of this stuff is BS, right? Especially when it's these young guys going out there, oh my God, whatever. They go in the abandoned building and it just happens to be, somebody's in there, or, they go out in the woods and, but there are a lot of experiences. There's that little bit, that are real experiences. And when the picture that I was talking about is a car accident, but the photo is a police photo from the 1980s. And I saw this come up on one of these recent compilations. And the first time I saw the story was on a channel called Faces of the Forgotten. And it's a guy who travels around the country and goes to cemeteries all over the country. And he tells, he finds like a particular story about a really interesting death that has to do with that cemetery. And a lot of this is submitted from viewers. So he'll tell that story. And so he told this story of this kid. He was 18 years old. He wasn't alone. He was driving a Jeep and they were going to a concert, 1980 something. And he took a curve a little too fast, went off the road, plowed into a tree. And the other two guys survived with injuries, but he was killed instantly because he was driving. And so the police came, and this is in the 1980s, so they had film cameras, no digital cameras. They came to the site to take the pictures. And I think I sent this to you, Dean, too. In one of the photos, you can see the face of this boy. I'm saying boy, he was 18 years old, because they show you his picture as a reference. They'll show you, but you can see his face starting in the upper right. Then there's this energy, this sweep of energy, and then you see him right in the middle screaming, literally screaming. And his head is even turning in the middle capture, which is all one picture. And then it goes off to the left and sort of sweeps out of view, but he's still screaming. And you can clearly see this is the kid. And the kid's body is laying right there. And in the rest of the picture, there's a ton of energy. There's all sorts of, like blur, energy, strings, and filaments of things going on. So, and this is the only picture of the series of pictures that the police photographer took that was like this. It is clearly this boy, and he didn't intend to die that day. And you can clearly see it. It's so vivid, and you can't miss it. A lot of people don't see the image on the right and the left. They're just focusing on the one in the middle. But when he took this picture, this spirit just swept through that one frame. And it makes you feel terrible. But here's a guy who just definitely did not intend to die. And people say, well, the tree is haunted, it's haunted. Not necessarily, because even in deaths like tragic deaths like that, they linger around and they go home And it may take them a while to understand that, yeah, I'm dead. Nobody sees me. They won't interact. And then, at some point they'll go, but a lot of times they will not. They can't accept it. And so these tragic deaths force people out. And so not only are all your characteristics and your emotional, your psychological state with you when you go, everything that you think you know about dying is with you too. So a lot of people are afraid. They're afraid they're going to get judged. We talked about this last week. They're afraid of God. They're going to get judged. They're afraid of guilt and being shamed for things that they thought they did or things they did that only they know, maybe. And they're scared. So there's fear, there's confusion, ignorance about, the circumstances of what went on. These are very common with tragic deaths. And eventually, what?
I
I'm
don't
sorry.
know if you remember. I don't know if you remember this investigation we did with 2 lost souls in New Orleans.
I can't remember the
Remember
exact one.
the duplex we did in New Orleans for an elderly lady because she kept
Oh,
seeing spirits,
yes, yeah, I
and
remember.
we had a medium come in, and he picked up, and we did the research to find out he picked up 2 guys that were shot. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
And they were like they weren't shot at that house
Right.
or even in front of the house. It was like a block or so over. But
Yeah.
they were in the lady's house because they were lost.
Yeah. Lost spirits. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that. It had happened like a couple of blocks away, and she began seeing them. And I think there was something where he said there's also a portal because there were other spirits that were involved in there. But the one she'd see standing in her room at night when she was trying to go to sleep. Yeah, there
Well,
was
she
these
was
men.
transition stage because she was elderly. She was going through
Hmm.
that so she could actually see spirits. But we found out that 2 of the spirits that she could see were those 2 guys.
Yeah, and they were together, but they were lost. So,
Mhm.
and a lot of times, like, these are the kind of spirits, like, it's important to get them to understand their situation and get them out of there. Because just like, you get frustrated or we get frustrated alive, they'll get frustrated and they'll begin to really haunt. It could be really become an active haunting, until they understand their situation. Or they are susceptible to the other spirits that are already in there, because not everybody that dies is improved. Nobody's improved by death, and not everybody and I always say this, anybody who's buried, with a Christian burial is necessarily a good person. And there are millions upon millions of evil dead. I mean, to coin a phrase, there are evil dead, various stages of it, but evil nonetheless. And evil in the way that they're evil or would impact us. We would have negatively, that they would negatively impact us if we experience them in a haunting, and they are negatively impacting spirits that are over there with them. Excuse me. A lot of times, we've talked about suicides, for instance, people who take their own lives, and a lot of times, families or survivors will say they had no clue and they were a happy person and they have no reason why. There's one story, we talked about Carl Wickland, who wrote the book 30 Years Among the Dead, and with his wife, who is a trance medium, help people remove spirits attached to them, and all sorts of other spirits would come whenever they would do these sittings, intending to help attached, maybe obsessed people. There would be other spirits that would come, and this is how they learned that the suicide victims, particularly, are a sad case because they're if they're susceptible in life, they may be sensitive, but they don't know it, you know. And then spirits who have done this, who have died that way, tend to gang together, hang out together on the other side, just like they, you know, they would here, like a gang. And they obsess people into killing themselves, into thinking, you know, this is the only solution for whatever. They'll magnify a problem and then say, you know, and influence them. And the spirit of the girl told them that as soon as she died, she saw the spirits. She hung herself in a barn. And as soon as she died, she was aware, and they were laughing at her. And there was the family left, and there was really no sign at all that this girl would ever do this to herself. So you have to be aware of that fact. This is why when we tell people don't use the Ouija board, this is why. You know, it's because it's throbbing with spirits around you, and they are here. You know, there are some that are good and that are going to help you and all, but there's the bigger chance that you're just going to reach out. It's like you know, if you do deep sea fishing, and we've talked about this, Dean, if you do deep sea fishing, you go out on a boat, or at least in my experience, and, you know, you bait the lines, and the guys that sit on the deck with the big fishing poles. But they also sometimes put out the trolling lines on the side of the boat, and they feed line down, you know, down away from the boat. So they're trolling in the deeper waters to get, you know, whatever might bite. You know, like they might be fishing for, you know, amberjack or whatever, but they may pick up something on one of these trolling lines. That's what the Ouija board is. That's what this, you know, holding seances on experience. That's what this is. You are literally fishing and trolling in a deep unknown that is populated with all sorts of spirits that are out there. And so you never know what you're going to get. And when they find someone newly dead, confused, you know, don't know what happened, a lot of times they're attracted to those kind of spirits that are newly dead and new to them. And they suck them up because, you know, then they want to ruin them as well because they're miserable too. But it's important to say that this doesn't happen to everybody when you die. Like, you know, this is a small percentage, but it's a small percentage over the course, the continuum of time, all time, you know, back through antiquity, before time. We don't know, you know, how people have been dying, but as long as there have been people and people have been dying, there are spirits that are out there, and they devolve a lot of times into what we would just call demons, devils. You know, when people talk about devils, the devils that plague, and they're not saying demons from hell, they're saying devils. A lot of times that's what they mean. That's what the occultists meant, is evil people out in the outlaw country of the etheric. And, you know, that's where suddenly the dead person is. And the tragically dead instantly in this realm. Well, we all have to go through there. We all have a passage through that to get through the astral, but hopefully you're having a good death. You've been blessed. Like my dad died. He was blessed by 2 ministers, 2 priests. So I was like, yeah, he's got it. You know, he's gone. He got him coming and going. He's all right, you know, so. And most people, this is the case, right? And, but it's important to say that not everybody. And that this is why when we say don't fool around with these things, this is why. No, you're probably not going to get a demon through a Ouija board, but you could get something else, and this is just as bad. But anyway, other reasons why the dead stay around, they have unfinished business. These are classics. Unfinished business, attachments to living people, worried about if they're going to be okay, you know, now that they're gone. And then attachment to places, their home, you know, or other places, and their things. So this is when you get, you know, ghosts who just won't move on. And then you have conditions like addictions, all sorts of, you know, just reasons to stay attached. addictions to drugs. We've talked about this: drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, everything, anything that you could be addicted to alive. These people sometimes carry these addictions with them, and they need to prey on the living in order to vicariously meet their needs, or so they think. And so a lot of times they'll hide. They're hiding from judgment. And it's like this twilight world of, like I often describe it as like, you're in the middle of a desert, and you suddenly come upon this convenience store, and it's the only one for miles and miles. So you're going to get a bunch of people going through there, and they can stay in this condition for years. But most of the time, when they complete their business, or they realize, a lot of times, even in these tragic accidents, there are spirits there all the time. There's, they say your guardian angel, but there are other spirits around you. And most of the time, spirits will show them what happened to them. Like in the case of that boy, you had this accident. There you are. There's your body. And then they'll take them to their family so that they can understand that they can't interact with them anymore, and they're not there. They can't be there. And it takes a little while sometimes for them to understand, and then they go on with the spirit. And it all sounds very nice, but I can tell you one thing: the closer I get to it, I just don't want to think about it. I don't want that to happen. I don't care. I don't want to go. No. But we all have to do it, right? So,
and we already know, do not stay here.
yeah, you can't. You can't stay here. I mean, when they're caught in that first sort of twilight, this is sometimes when the living experience them. I know you got examples too, but I had an aunt whose husband died, a great aunt, and he died in the hospital, and then they went to you got to go to the funeral home and make all the arrangements and whatever. And she did that. They left the hospital and went and made the arrangements. And she came home to her house. It was only her. Well, there were other people, but they left her. They had to leave her there. And she's one of them. I'll be okay, And she went into her bedroom, and she saw her dead mother, my great grandmother, sitting on her bed. And great grandmother said to her, "Larry's fine," because that was her husband's name. "He's with me." And before she could say okay or anything, she just vanished. Grandma vanished. And she told us all that at the funeral. She told us that she was at peace with it, because she knew that he was okay. He was in good hands. And sometimes it's them themselves that come back and, tell you they're okay and not to worry. Everything is fine. And then a lot of times they come and they want you to know where things are. Something's hidden. They have unfinished business. And when that's complete, then they move on. Then they're able to leave the earth sphere and go on to wherever it is we go. I don't know where my ticket to what, purgatory, who knows? Hell, I don't know. But they're going on. And most of the time it's good. I mean, I'm joking around, but I'm laughing because I don't know where I'm going. Laugh to keep from worrying about it. But when you understand the process of death during the time when, there's a time that they can stay close to their body, that there's still there's still etheric energy for them to use to do things like that, to tell you goodbye, to solve a puzzle, show you where something is, or make themselves known if there's something going on, whatever. And then when that energy dissipates completely, they finally are disconnected completely from their body. They can move on. Now, the dead, can they hear? Right afterward, they can, because they're really what you call the etheric revenant. They haven't fully become spirit. So in that immediate time right afterward, they can still sense things. They're not feeling pain. Like if you stick them with something, they're not going to, but they have a sort of semi-physical reality or consistency, I guess I would say, where they can still feel sort of human, sort of alive, and not just spirit. But then eventually that, and pretty quickly, that energy dissipates and they move on. Now, in some cases, there are people who, knowing this, and you may come across these people in paranormal investigation, they know the process. And in life, they prepare themselves mentally and their spirit. They prepare themselves to stay awake through the death process for their consciousness, which is the first thing that, that passes to the other side, your consciousness, what you're experiencing. And these are usually people who are practicing really dark occultism, from that level. But there are these people, and you might come across this. You might come across the spirit of a dead occultist, let's say, a dead Satanist, a dead who knew very well, either knew they were dying, or when they were coming to the end of their life, they were able to train their consciousness, let's say, to avoid the death process, to, stay alert, awake, and be aware of everything that's happening to them. So they are still there. And as long as their body, as long as they have, now what does this sound like to you? As long as they have a physical body, a piece of a body to remain attached to, they can persist in the etheric. Now that sounds to me like a vampire. That's exactly what it is. That's a vampire. It's a human vampire, okay? It's a vampire that was just human, and it's a psychic. Really, what I meant to say was a psychic vampire, but that's a vampire. They're aware, and they are fully aware that they are supposed to be dead, but they're not, because they don't want to be. So they continue to interact in bad ways with the living. They have to sap the energy from somewhere, and that's what they do. So you have psychic vampires, and you have the vampire of tradition that can suck blood eventually, or, we're going to get into that, into the creatures later. But this is essentially the theory behind a vampire. They can keep themselves awake, aware. It's not the body that's coming up out of the vampire's grave. It's the spirit. And it's doing all the preying on on the people around it. But there are people who can evade it for a while. Even so, their bodies are going to decay, and eventually that link is going to be broken too. And they'll have to just deal with where they are. And where they would be really in the outlaw country. These are the types of spirits. Again, they would just go and be with the spirits that are out there, that are crowded out in this in-between world before you really get to experience what the astral reality is and what basically, I guess, heaven is, or you get to be with your God or whatever. They're in this in-between twilight area. Now, we've talked about the dead having things to do and complete, and all the reasons why they may stay attached to their family or hang around for a while or even longer. But there's another thing that plays a role in keeping spirits here, and that's grief. We've talked about this a lot when we've spoken at conventions. The grief process, it's important for people to grieve and to be able to leave the process. Because if they just fall into a complete distraction of grief and it goes on and on and on, it will keep the spirit, it can keep the spirit there. out of concern, for, the spirit is concerned for the dead loved one, and they want to do something to comfort her. Then, it goes on to, they can't detach because they're wrapped up in the feelings and the emotions of grief. And this is why, asterisk, for the paranormal investigator, this is why running around in cemeteries with cameras and EVPs, especially around people that, places where people have just been buried and stuff, is not really, unless you know what you're doing and you're aware of these things, it's not really a good thing to be doing. Because there may be a woman, let's say, whose husband died, and she comes every day, and cries at his grave, and cries and cries and cries at his grave, and then goes home and cries and cries. And that misery, that grief attracts other spirits. And they don't all leave with her from the cemetery. It basically works up other spirits that have no connection whatsoever. And they begin to feel this grief, this emotion, and it draws them to her. And she goes home, and she may have additional attachments. And then her loved one can't break the connection. So it's important to remember, like in my book, I talk about this folk tale, which is famous in Britain and in parts of Europe, about the demon lover. And this is a situation, very briefly, where a girl's in love with a guy. He goes off to war, or he goes on a ship. It's different, where he goes, but he goes typically to war. And she doesn't hear that he's dead, that he's just unaccounted for. And she grieves and grieves and grieves and cries. And then it may be that they confirm that he's dead, and she grieves and grieves and cries. And then one night she hears horses' hooves, and she looks out of her window, and there he is on the horse. And he's saying, "Come out, come to me, I'm back." She runs down, gets on the horse, and suddenly she puts her arms around him, and the next thing you know, she's grabbing a skeleton or a corpse or a decomposing body, and the next thing you know, the horse is running off madly, goes into the cemetery, jumps into the cemetery, into the fence, and boom, they're gone. Either some of them have him jump over a grave or into a grave, but basically it's the same thing. And basically the message is, stop the grief. She grieved and grieved and grieved, so that wherever he was, buried, wherever he was, it woke him up enough to come back and get her, because she wouldn't, and the story, when they jump into a grave, someone comes along the next day, they're looking for the girl, but they find like a piece of her dress or some sort of scrap of, fabric or whatever, that lets them know that it was her, and on top of a grave or mixed in with the mud of a grave or whatever. So we saw that in Sleepy Hollow, when at the end, Christopher Walken takes the woman who's given Johnny Depp and them all his problems, grabs her, and they go into the tree, and the tree closes, and she goes to hell with him. We saw this with Nosferatu, the recent movie. This psychic connection that was so strong and her psychic connection was just to the spirit world, that it woke him up and he preyed on her for years until he finally came to her. And then, see the movie. It's great. Masterpiece. But it's the typical demon lover type situation. And only that's dealing with Dracula, and all the other things that go with it. But it's basically the same thing. So it's the same thing in modern times. This is why people if you can't stop grieving, if you can't get over it, you need to seek help. You need to either seek out, your faith, or you need to seek professional help, because it's important for you, and it's important for the spirit of that dead person, that you get over it as much as you can. And, begin to celebrate the memories and remember the good things, rather than dwelling, on the fact that that person is not here, because it's not good for them. And, and it can attract spirits to them as Wicklin has, learned and talked about, and it can attract them to you. And then, Dean, this is a good, where suddenly you're getting spirit activity after a death, right? It's not always
Well,
the dead loved one, right?
I always ask people that call me for the recently dead. They want to do EVP. And, I tell them that's not a good idea and I won't do that because I feel that I know, in their grieving process, they want to hear the spirit's voice. They miss them. That's understandable. But I let them know, because they've recently died, do you really want to contact them now and hold them here? Because it's not a good conversation between you and the spirit because you're grieving hard right now.
Right.
So I tell them, you need to wait for quite a while before you try to contact the recently dead. You have to give them time to move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they need time to understand what happened to them, basically. Right. I mean, some of them are instantly self-aware and they know, or they were mentally prepared for it, or whatever. But yeah, that's important. And there's really only a small window, but yeah, people want to hear. They want to, and it's so. I mean, it's just it's just the human condition. You want it, you miss them, you want, but for everybody's sake, it's better. And if you really want to, you should wait about 6 months or so. But I would say, I don't know, what do you think? I've always said more than a year, you're probably not going to be talking to your dead, whatever. If you're trolling, basically, going to the graveyard, especially, looking for EVPs, trying to talk to, your dead Uncle Joe or your dead husband Joe or whatever, after a year's time, the spirit has understood that they're dead and they've been able to move on. And so, when I guess I'm talking particularly in cemetery situations when, people, they go, I've seen, and you've seen this on YouTube and stuff, they'll go through a graveyard and they'll randomly walking around and they say, oh, here's Colonel so-and-so, blah, 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 died 18, whatever, something like that. And they start, trying to EVP with them. And then they get a hit. So the guy's in the grave, since 1843, Colonel Joe Blow, right? And he's not even skin. I mean, the bones are even, getting dusty in there. And, you got people, it's him. He's answering the questions. I know it's Colonel whatever, Well, what do we say, Dean? No, not always. Very
Not
likely
always.
not. Very likely not Colonel Joe Blow.
You even know that person's voice if they're that old.
Yeah. And a lot of times you'll see them talk or answer in like modern phrases or responses that would not be, basically a person from 18 something would not talk like that. The best ones, and this is kind of taking a little asterisk, are the ones, the American or English speaking paranormal investigators who find themselves in, I don't know, Romania, in a cemetery, and they're getting, English responses, but they're surrounded by a bunch of dead Romanians or Parisians, or, they're in Hungary or they go to Greece, and it just, I've always, it's like we were talking about Derek Acora in the first part of this. And it's like, oh, he was always hitting no matter where they were, and this is true of ghost adventures and ghost hunters. They're in Dracula's castle and he spoke a dead dialect of, Wallachian, Transylvanian. How's he going to understand? What do they have? Like is it like they become omniscient and they understand everything because they're in the spirit world? I mean, that's not him. It's not Dracula. Okay. If you're understanding and they're saying yes, and, over there, whatever, and you can understand it in whatever language you speak, then that's not them. That's something else. And it's going to talk to you in your language no matter where, because it's trying to attach to you. You may have brought it, so this is the other thing that that bothers me. It's like I don't know, I watch, for an example, Franco. Good old little Franco from Franco's TV came down here to New Orleans and stood right where I got so aggravated with him, in a cemetery where my parents are buried and my grandmother, my mama and my parents in one tomb. He was literally at the apex of like the crossroad that led one side. You could see my mom and dad and my mama's names on the tomb right over his right shoulder. And then right over to his left is my grandma and grandpa and another uncle. And I was in the comments live telling him, quit filming my family, because he was running around like Lawn Cemetery saying there's voodoo here and stuff. He was putting, obviously, if you look on his description there, I think there is a disclaimer that it's for entertainment purposes only now. He used to say that it wasn't, but he was running around like Lawn Cemetery right in front. And I kept saying, not only that, I said, stop filming my family. And I kept saying it. And then I said, you need to get out of there because you are in New Orleans this late running around in the cemetery that anybody has access to. You're nuts. Okay. And sure enough, he almost got killed. He snuck into Metairie Cemetery driving, he waited until he hid until they closed the gates. He goes driving around and then he gets out, right? And he's got all this equipment and all. And what do you know? It's like zombies, only they're not zombies. They're homeless people that live under the bridge right there, in the Metairie overpass that's going right there, and stay in the cemetery at night. He almost got robbed and carjacked. And everybody, there were a few of us from here in the comments going, get out of there. And we were like in big, in all caps. We were saying it so much that his mother, who was watching, started to tell him to get out of there. I was like, you need to get out of there now. Okay. And this was a few years ago. So he's running around in the cemetery all the freaking time. Okay. All the time. And he's making up stuff. And every now and then he gets a hit on something. And you can tell because he's surprised. Remember, we talked about ghost hunters last time when they were doing the Myrtles. They caught something outside on the thermal cam, and they were both surprised, visually and vividly. You could see it. We're like, oh, we really got something. Duh. Okay. The only time Franco, I can't say the only time, I don't watch everything he does, but one time he was going somewhere out west and he was driving. I think he was going to Skinwalker Ranch. And he stopped in Colorado at the Watts house. The murder. Chris Watts murdered his wife and his two little girls, shoved the little girls into oil tanks and all. Okay, so that house, which has been renovated and bought and then resold again. This was within, I think, a year of the murders, maybe, that Franco went out there. And this is the law of averages. He captured something. The video, you can go look at his channel and it's online. He went there. There's no way, Dean, that he could have faked any of this. He just drove up to this house and he had his FLIR and he had his IR camera and he was doing it live, but he wasn't like being intrusive. He went there because they had like a memorial thing and people were leaving stuffed animals and stuff like that. And so he did that. Well, he came there with that intent and then he pulled out his camera. I mean, look, wouldn't you, if you were passing, wouldn't you be looking? I mean, you're an investigator. If you were going through there, you would, just to see. And a lot of people did. And I'd tell you to. I mean, I'm not going to say, I'd say, get it, do something, he didn't do EVPs because he doesn't, he does do that, but he didn't do it. And he caught this gooberhead, right, who runs around in baloney most of the time. He caught the woman's spirit, actually, he caught the two little girls in one of the bedrooms upstairs. You could clearly see it with the thermal camera. And then he kind of,
Wow.
yeah, I know I sent you this. I'll have to say, he caught the two little girls and they were literally moving. They were moving, and you could see one of them like had an arm up and was like leaning on the window. And there was a third spirit that was with them for like a minute. And then he moved, he walked over down the sidewalk and he did the front door. And now it's a front door that has the long glass panels on either side of it, that you can see through. And before he said it, I saw it. Everybody saw it. I got chills, so I know it's for real. I got chills just now. Her face, Shanann Watts, was looking out of the door. He nearly fell down. He was like, "Wait a minute, the face." And this always happens when you have this mostly bogus, and then suddenly they find something. Okay, and he did. He caught the best captures of anybody of this haunting at that house. And her face, she was clearly looking out at him from her front door, from next to the front door. It was creepy. It was, when you know it's real. Because in order to fake that, he lives in Florida and that house is in Colorado. There's no way to fake that. There's no way he could have coordinated with anybody to fake that, because he couldn't get in the house. And there's no way to fake a thermal capture from the outside and put in images later. You can't do that either. So he literally captures the best, as far as I'm concerned, the best. But you see, eventually her parents got possession of that house because the idiot went to jail. He should have gone to the electric chair or wherever, but he went to jail for life. And so the parents got and I think they were part owners of it at some point. But anyway, they got the house and they asked people to stop coming and leaving the tributes, that they appreciated it, but to stop coming. And it was mostly because they had to pick it all up and didn't know what to do with it, probably. But just that alone, suddenly, from the first flowers or whatever that are left, that in and of itself had those spirits there. Now, they may have come and gone between places, but to die as tragically and as unexpectedly as she did, and those girls, and there are hours and hours of police camera captures of the EVPs from that house when they went in there. Now, have you watched it? Have you watched any of that? I think I sent you. There's like long hours. Yeah.
I watched a documentary on the story of the murders.
There's a good one on Netflix. That might be the one you watch. I watched it. Well, right. there's on YouTube. You can get, it's like something like, I don't know, 8 hours altogether of all of the police's video. All of their footage just playing. Nobody edited anything. So you can get that. But the day that they went, it was all happening basically. The day it all went down, the next day after the murders, they talked with him and all this. The press came. I think it was maybe, it wasn't the day, but it was the next morning. Anyway, they brought in a scent dog, to get the scent, to try and find, whatever they bring them in for. And this is a woman that I saw on a Missing 411 documentary, and she's like one of the best search and rescue dog teams that is out there. She's an older woman, but she has, her and her dog have been like in a lot of high profile stuff. And so she was brought in with her dog, and she went into the house. They got everybody out of it, and he was in it, and a film crew for like a local film crew. So they asked him to leave, and she went in with the dog and one female deputy, and it's the deputy's camera that you're getting the footage from. And when they walked into the house, the woman with the dog advanced a little bit, and you hear a voice from nowhere say, no, loud as can be. And you could tell that the deputy was like, whoa, like, what is that? At the same time, there's captures of the little girls going up and down the stairs. Like, there you can clearly see two little girls on the staircase to the left of the officer. And then even the woman with the dog, she turned around and she said, well, that's something. That's, and then there's the famous footage of the girls giggling in the background when they're going in the closet and everything. And they thought they had stepped on a toy or something, but you can hear her and the girls in the background. So as long as they were all that energy that went into that, they were there. And by the time that Franco got his little butt out to Colorado, and just showed up in the middle of the night one night, he definitely, very definitely caught the best evidence of that haunting. Now, I don't know if they're still there, but it makes sense that she would be home. She would be there. That would be the first place. And she even says in an EVP, this is our home, that you can hear it in the background. And it makes sense. But 6-7 months down the line, that there's still a pile of stuffed animals, balloons, and all this other stuff. That's when you got to stop it. And I think they did, not for any supernatural reason or paranormal reason, but just because they couldn't handle it anymore. They didn't know what to do with all of, these things. They couldn't bring them across the country to where they have it buried. So they just asked people to stop leaving them. And then eventually somebody bought the house and all that stuff. And they were saying they thought that the spirits were there, and they were, probably not. Probably she's moved on because her remains and the children's remains are on the other side of the country. She's probably with her family, if she's anywhere at all, but that he captured. And there's an example, that's a good example of leaving these memorials and all this other stuff. It's very nice, but it doesn't help. Eventually there should be like a little time frame and then enough, because that keeps a spirit fixed in between our world and the world they're supposed to go to. And spirit energy, we talked about the lady, on YouTube that has the little girl spirit that followed her across the country too and still lives with her. Like we say, and you always say, that just attracts other spirits. It inevitably does, because that kind of energy, they're bored too. Like, if they're looking for stuff to do too, like, I don't know, I haven't been there yet, but I mean, they're bored, they're attracted to, and a childlike energy among other children, the imaginary playmate type thing. So, understanding not only the levels of existence, but the activities of the spirits that are over there, particularly the dead, who is primarily what you're, as a paranormal investigator, are going to be dealing with mostly the spirits of dead humans, I would imagine. Whether, recently dead or long dead, it would still be. And, they can come and go. Like, if you're specifically calling for, I don't know, Abraham Lincoln's wife, let's say, near the White House, you're in a hotel near the White House and you're calling for Mary Todd Lincoln, she might come. She might not, or she might bring, a bunch of bad spirits with her. But I mean, they are allowed to travel in between, but they are in a realm where they're, either enjoying the afterlife or whatever, but they do have permission, and their guides, their angelic guides, can bring them, like when you need your family, like, when there's a tragedy and you think about everybody who's dead, they're around you, they're able to come. They're not prohibited, from giving you comfort and, giving you strength. That's not it. But you just don't want that around you all the time. And it's not always around you all the time. So when you're going to everywhere you go as a paranormal investigator, especially if you're on TV, and you get something every time, everywhere you go, like Derek Acora, then it's bullshit, right? Okay, it's just bullshit. So I guess I guess we can just end that there. It's just, there's a lot of complexity that goes into it, and you only really understand it if you open yourself up to reading the occult and psychic perspectives on it, rather than approaching it like we were talking last week with a dead-on skeptic. I don't believe anything. Prove it to me. Well, if you don't believe it, what are you looking for? What don't you believe in? Yeah, and they're out there. I know you know them.
Oh yeah.
I know you know them. So, and they go put themselves into stupid situations like Franco, for instance. But I'm just glad he did not get killed. It was bad there for a while. And we were like, people were in the comments going, well, where are you? And he's like, I don't know. I see this street sign. And he said what street he was on. And he was right by Delgado, sitting by the most haunted cemetery, right, Dean? Sitting right there by Hope. And I'm like, so, why? You could have gone there and not even, gone to I don't know where I'm at. I'm like, you're right by a cemetery. And at that time, I don't know that they had the gates, like they revamped it or not, but he still could have walked around it, like around the outside. And I'm like, you're right by the most haunted place. Most haunted cemetery in New Orleans is Holt Cemetery. Okay. That's it. And you're right there. No, he drove away. He went back to Lake Lawn and films my mama and daddy's. I'm like, stop doing that. You don't have permission. Stand somewhere else. Stand outside. You don't have to be in there with especially all those Italians up in there. Okay, they're going to give you problems. You don't want my grandma coming out out of there, kicking him out of there. You don't want that, Franco. Believe me. So, and she would. She'd come back just to kick him out of Lake Lawn Cemetery. So. But anyway, so yeah, that'll wrap it up. So next week we're going to continue on. I hope you guys are enjoying this series. And if you have any questions or comments, just put them down below in the comments, and we'll try and answer them. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll have learned what we know. But we'll get into that further along, the dangers of the Ouija board and the types of creatures that you can encounter, real creatures, supernatural creatures that you can encounter. But for now, we're going to wrap it up and leave it there. If you like it, and if you've stayed with us this long, please go ahead and leave a like, share our videos, leave a comment. And if you're looking for an excellent paranormal investigative team, call Dean, and her info will be down in the description. And also a link to my books if you are inclined to buy them. So we would appreciate it. But anyway, that wraps it up. And we will see you guys again next week for another installation of Supernatural Dangers of Paranormal Investigation.